U.S. President Joe Biden is vowing to respond after a drone strike on a U.S. military base in Jordan killed 3 service members and injured 30 others.
And we shall respond.
The drone struck the U.S. Army base in northeast Jordan on the border with Syria Sunday morning. The Biden administration believes an Iran-backed militia group is behind the attack, but it hasn't determined which group is responsible. The attack is the first time U.S. troops have been killed by enemy fire in the Middle East since the start of the war in Gaza. Joining me now to discuss is Dakota Wood, Senior Research Fellow for Defense Programs, the Heritage Foundation. Dakota, good morning, and thank you so much for being with us. Lots of questions. I want to start by asking you if this is a potentially a turning point. There have always been concerns that the war beyond Gaza would expand across the region. Your thoughts now on this latest move?
A huge risk. I mean, here in the U.S., mounting diplomatic or political pressure on the Biden administration to be very forceful in its response, and not to just the Iranian-backed groups in Syria or Yemen or anywhere else, but against Iran directly. And this flies in the face of all of the concerns about broadening this conflict that you already mentioned, widening the war, and if you're going to attack Iran directly hard enough to cause pain, well, by definition, it causes pain. So does that elicit an additional response from Iran? So this is a huge, risky period of time, and we'll have to see what course the Biden administration takes.
What options does Biden have?
It can try to identify the specific group that mounted the attack on U.S. forces in Jordan and go after just them. It could more broadly attack Iranian-backed militia groups who have been responsible for upwards of 160 attacks in Syria and western Iraq. You could go after Houthi rebels, which is a proxy for Iran there in Yemen, or as I mentioned, against Iran itself. So command and control facilities, the manufacturing facilities that make these drones or that provide support to them. You could go against IRGC or Quds Force organizations, or even its naval capabilities, these small boats and things that it's used to harass international shipping. So there's this broad range. You could go non-kinetic, even cyber attacks against a lot of infrastructure in Iran, to include its nuclear program. But each one of these escalates and would surely invite an Iranian response.
What are we hearing from Iran?
They disavow any connection at all, right? So everybody knows that a militia group could not fire a missile or use a drone if it wasn't provided by Iran. I mean, these groups don't make these things themselves. So the funding, the moral support, spiritual support, training, all comes from Iran. But Iran is saying, we weren't directly involved. We didn't order any attacks. Don't blame us. It's a U.S. problem with militia groups in the region. So they're trying to get out of this and avoid any kind of strike against Iran proper.
The American soldiers were in their sleeping quarters. This appears to be an act of provocation. What's the end game here?
It's to try to drive the United States out of the region. So if you increase the cost, either materially or now with deaths and additional casualties, does the U.S. kind of pull up its tent stakes and leave? Is it further punishment? Clearly, yes, for U.S. support to Israel and its conflict with Hamas. So all of these things are meant to increase the cost of the United States remaining involved in the Middle East. It's going to be supported in some way by Russia and China and Iran in other ways, because the more problems the U.S. has, the less it can vote attention-wise to supporting Ukraine or Taiwan or Israel. So it's this complicating factor that they're really driving at.
So in your mind, according to the president's words, we will respond, but do you think, Dakota, that it will be with force?
Absolutely, it has to be. You know, the criticism has been these pinprick, quid pro quo, proportional responses where the U.S. hits a warehouse in the middle of the desert. Clearly, that hasn't done anything to deter action. So it's going to have to be a very forceful response that Biden is able to say it doesn't make him look weak, that America is still in the game and strong. And always keep in mind this U.S. Election cycle pitting Joe Biden against most likely Donald Trump, and who is perceived as being the more competent confident and aggressive president or president-to-be supporting U.S. military forces in the field and the United States here at home.
So to come full circle and to wrap up our conversation, Dakota, do you think that whatever the U.S. does, however they respond, will increase the risk of further escalation across the region as a whole?
Yeah, I really do. It's a sad outcome to that, but this timidity and half-stepping in the years leading to, right, giving Iran billions of dollars to release a hostage or a prisoner to try to get it to walk away from its nuclear program, only incentivizes this sort of aggressive behavior because there's no consequence, negatively speaking, on the Iranian side. So you get to a point where the blow has to be severe, it has to be hard, that risks escalation. And I think we're just in a very dark period this spring.
Dakota Wood, great to have you with us today. Really appreciate your time and your analysis. Dakota Wood is a senior research fellow for defense programs with the Heritage Foundation.